Mercedes thought they had found the upgrade that could change everything in Austria. Then, before it could become their weapon, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile shut it down. And now the question is not just whether Mercedes lost performance. The question is whether they were stopped because they went too far, or because they found something the rest of the paddock could not ignore. Toto Wolff is furious. George Russell has every reason to be furious. Because in Formula One, when an upgrade gets banned, the damage is never just the missing part. It is the lost confidence, the wasted preparation, the broken strategy, and the terrifying possibility that the team's entire development direction has just been hit at the worst possible moment. Austria was supposed to reveal whether Mercedes had finally unlocked the car. Instead, it may reveal something much darker. A fight over rules. A fight over trust. And a decision that could change not only Russell's weekend, but the future of Mercedes' comeback. Because if this upgrade was as important as Mercedes believed, then the real story is not that it got banned. The real story is why they needed it so badly. Subscribe to the channel. Mercedes did not walk into Austria looking for a miracle. They walked in looking for proof. Proof that the car was finally responding. Proof that the factory had not been chasing the wrong answer. Proof that George Russell could arrive at a weekend and feel something every driver needs before they can truly attack. Trust. That is why this banned upgrade matters so much. Because an upgrade in Formula One is not just a new piece bolted onto the car. It is months of belief turned into carbon fiber. It is simulation work, late nights, meetings, doubts, arguments, and tiny details that only a few people in the garage fully understand. And then, suddenly, that belief meets the rulebook. That is where everything changes. For casual fans, a banned part can sound simple. The team brought something. The officials looked at it. The officials said no. End of story. But in Formula One, it is never that clean. Every team is trying to find speed in the spaces nobody else has noticed. Not by breaking the rules, but by reading them more cleverly than the people next door. The fastest cars are often built in those thin gray areas, where one interpretation can be worth more than 100 hours of ordinary development. Mercedes knows that better than almost anyone. This is a team built on detail. Built on control. Built on the idea that if you understand the car deeply enough, you can make the impossible feel routine. But Austria threatened to turn that strength against them. Because when the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile blocks an upgrade, it does not only remove a part from the car. It removes a piece of the plan. And plans matter. Imagine training for a race in one pair of running shoes, then being told right before the start that you cannot wear them. You can still run. You can still fight. You can still finish. But every step feels different, because the thing you trusted has been taken away. That is what Mercedes now has to manage. Not just a car without the upgrade. A weekend without the certainty the upgrade was meant to bring. And this is where George Russell becomes central to the story. Because drivers do not feel upgrades as technical drawings. They feel them through the steering wheel. They feel them when the car turns in cleanly, when the rear stays calm, when the tires stay alive, when the lap starts to come toward them instead of fighting back. If the upgrade was meant to help the car become more predictable, then losing it is not just frustrating. It is personal. Russell is the one who has to brake at the limit. Russell is the one who has to trust the rear through the fastest moments. Russell is the one who has to decide, in a fraction of a second, whether the car will hold, or whether it will punish him for believing too much. And at Austria, that decision comes again and again. The circuit is short, sharp, and unforgiving. There is no long lap where a driver can hide a weakness. A small loss becomes obvious. A small hesitation becomes expensive. A small balance problem can follow the car from corner to corner like a shadow. That is why the timing hurts. Mercedes did not need drama. They needed clarity. They needed a weekend where the upgrade could answer questions. Is the car moving in the right direction? Can Russell push harder? Can the team build momentum? Can the gap to the front start to feel smaller, not in speeches, but on track? Instead, they were handed a different question. What happens when the answer you prepared is no longer allowed? And that question is dangerous, because it does not stop at Austria. If the banned part was connected to a bigger development direction, then Mercedes may not only be dealing with a short-term loss. They may be facing a warning about where their next upgrades can and cannot go. That is the part most people miss. A ruling like this can echo through the factory. Engineers have to ask whether future parts need to be changed. Strategists have to adjust expectations. The drivers have to reset their feeling for the car. And Toto Wolff has to stand between frustration and leadership, trying to protect the team while knowing that everyone in the paddock is watching. Because rivals will be watching. They always do. If Mercedes found a clever idea, rival teams want to know what it was. If the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile shut it down, they want to know why. And if the decision exposes a weakness in Mercedes' development path, they will smell it immediately. Formula One is polite in public. It is ruthless underneath. And that is why this situation feels bigger than a single upgrade. It is not only about whether Mercedes can recover a few tenths. It is about whether the team still controls its own comeback, or whether the rulebook has just forced them onto a different road. That is the uncomfortable truth. Mercedes can be furious. Russell can feel robbed of a better chance. Wolff can question how the decision landed when it did. But the car still has to roll out. The stopwatch still has to judge it. And Austria will not care how strong the argument sounds in the paddock. The circuit will only ask one thing. What do you have left now? Then came the part Mercedes could not control. The ruling. And in Formula One, a ruling can be more powerful than an engine, more damaging than a bad pit stop, and more dangerous than a slow lap in practice. Because once the governing body says no, the entire weekend changes shape. Mercedes may have arrived with a plan built around one expectation. The car would run with the new part. Russell would feel what the upgrade changed. The engineers would compare the data. The team would finally know whether this direction was real, or just another hopeful step in a long and painful search. But the moment the upgrade was banned, that plan collapsed into something much colder. Improvisation. And improvisation is not where a Formula One team wants to live. Not at this level. Not at Austria. Not when every rival is waiting for proof that Mercedes is still vulnerable. The first problem is obvious. The car may lose the benefit the upgrade was supposed to bring. But the second problem is much worse. Mercedes also loses the information the upgrade was supposed to reveal. That difference matters. Because in Formula One, data is not just numbers on a screen. Data is confidence. Data tells engineers whether a theory is alive or dead. Data tells the driver whether the feeling in the cockpit matches what the factory predicted. Data tells the team whether the next upgrade should follow the same path, or whether the entire idea needs to be questioned. So when the part is blocked, Mercedes does not just lose speed. They lose a piece of the map. And that is where Toto Wolff's frustration becomes easier to understand. A team principal can accept being beaten on track. Painful, yes. Public, yes. But at least the stopwatch gives a clear answer. This is different. This is losing a planned test before the test even begins. It is like building a key for a locked door, carrying it all the way to the front of the building, and then being told the key cannot be used. Maybe the key would have opened the door. Maybe it would have failed. But now you do not even get to find out. That is the detail that can poison a weekend. Not knowing. And Russell is caught right in the middle of that uncertainty. Because from the outside, people may say a driver should simply adapt. And yes, elite drivers adapt all the time. They adapt to wind, tires, fuel weight, track temperature, traffic, strategy, pressure. But there is a difference between adapting to conditions and adapting to a lost expectation. When a driver is told an upgrade is coming, he starts building a mental picture. He imagines where the car might improve. He listens to the engineers. He prepares for a slightly different balance. He gets ready to push in a new way. Then suddenly, the promised tool is gone. And now he has to reset. Fast. That is not easy, because a Formula One driver does not drive with vague hope. He drives with precision. He needs to know what the car will do before it does it. Trust is built in tiny layers, corner by corner, lap by lap. Take away one expected layer, and the whole feeling can shift. At Austria, that is especially brutal. The Red Bull Ring is not a track that gives drivers time to think. It attacks quickly. Heavy braking, hard acceleration, curbs that invite risk, and corners where a small mistake can ruin the next section before the driver has even recovered. A car that is slightly uncertain becomes a bigger problem there. If Russell cannot lean on the car exactly how he wants, he may have to leave a little margin. And a little margin in Formula One is never little. It becomes a tenth, then another, then a lost position, then a strategy that has to become defensive instead of aggressive. And this is where the ban starts affecting more than Russell's lap time. It can affect the whole race shape. A faster car gives a team options. It can undercut. It can overcut. It can protect tires. It can pressure the car ahead. It can force rivals to react. A less certain car takes options away. The team may have to protect tire life more carefully. They may have to choose safer windows. They may have to avoid traffic instead of attacking it. They may have to think less about hunting forward, and more about preventing the weekend from slipping backwards. That is the hidden cost of a banned upgrade. It can turn ambition into caution. And caution is dangerous when a team is trying to prove it is back. But there is another reason this ruling stings. Timing. In Formula One, when a decision lands matters almost as much as what the decision says. If an idea is questioned early enough, the team can adjust. It can redesign. It can simulate alternatives. It can prepare another version. It can brief the drivers calmly. But when the problem appears close to the race weekend, everything becomes compressed. The engineers have fewer choices. The drivers have less time. The setup direction becomes less certain. The message to the outside world becomes harder to control. And rivals begin to circle. Because every team knows what this looks like. They know when a competitor has been forced into reaction mode. They can sense when the plan has changed. They can hear it in the careful language. They can see it in the extra work around the garage. They can feel it in the tension when a driver steps out of the car and gives feedback that does not sound as clean as expected. That is why this is not just a technical story. It is a pressure story. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile may see a regulation issue. Mercedes may see a blocked innovation. Russell may feel a lost chance. Wolff may see a threat to the team's momentum. All of those things can be true at the same time. And that is what makes Formula One so ruthless. There is rarely one clean villain. There is rarely one simple answer. There is just the rulebook, the car, the stopwatch, and the people caught between them. But now comes the question that should worry Mercedes the most. What if the upgrade was not only meant to make the car faster? What if it was meant to make the car easier to understand? Because those are not the same thing. A part can give pure speed. That is easy to see. The lap time drops, the driver smiles, the team celebrates. But sometimes, the most valuable upgrade is the one that makes the car predictable. The one that stops the rear from surprising the driver. The one that keeps the tires in a better window. The one that lets the team set up the car without feeling like every adjustment creates a new problem somewhere else. That kind of upgrade may not look dramatic on a headline. But inside a garage, it can be priceless. Because a predictable car gives a team something stronger than speed. It gives them direction. And if Mercedes lost a part that was supposed to give them direction, then the Austrian ban becomes much more serious. It means the weekend may not answer the question they brought the upgrade to solve. And if the question stays unanswered, it travels with them. To the next race. To the next factory meeting. To the next design review. To the next moment Russell asks whether the car will finally let him attack without hesitation. That is why Wolff and Russell's anger would not just be emotional. It would be strategic. They would know the cost of uncertainty. They would know how much work sits behind one visible part. They would know that the rest of the paddock will not wait for Mercedes to recover. Because Formula One never waits. While Mercedes argues, Red Bull studies. While Mercedes adapts, McLaren learns. While Mercedes resets, Ferrari watches for weakness. Every rival understands that disruption can be opportunity. And if Mercedes loses momentum in Austria, even slightly, that can become a gift for everyone around them. This is the part fans often do not see. The fight does not only happen on Sunday. It happens in the days before, when confidence is built or broken. It happens in the interpretation of rules. It happens in what a team is allowed to test. It happens in the feeling a driver carries into the first serious lap. And once that feeling changes, everything else can follow. So Mercedes now faces a brutal test. Not whether they can complain. Not whether they can explain. Not whether they can convince fans that the decision was harsh. The real test is whether they can perform without the answer they expected to have. Because if they still look strong, the message is powerful. It means the car's progress is bigger than one band upgrade. But if the weekend starts to unravel, the message becomes darker. It means the blocked part may have been more important than Mercedes wants the world to realize. And that is exactly why the next stage of this story matters. Because the reaction from Wolff, Russell, the paddock, and the rival teams will tell us whether this was a small regulatory setback, or the first visible crack in Mercedes' comeback plan.